All right, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. We got a packed house here. Welcome, welcome. Hope everybody enjoyed the first session. I am very excited to introduce to you Vik Saluja from Mastercard and Josh Bauman from IBM Cloudability, and they're here to talk to you today about fueling your sustainability goals at every stage of FinOps with Mastercard.
Excellent. Welcome.
Hi, folks. Welcome.
Just a quick rundown of the agenda here. We're going to hear a little bit more about Mastercard so that you can kind of see where they're going, and then we're going to talk about every step along the way, inform, optimize, and operate, how sustainability can be taken on each of those phases. As we know, it's a journey, so not everybody's going to be at the same place at the same time. That doesn't mean you can't get started today. And then we're going to go have a little sneak peek into the future of where we're going, and how do you get started. So, Vik, how about you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I don't know, some of you were in this last session with Farhan, right? So let's see if we can meet that level of, it was a pretty entertaining session and pretty informative too. So another thing I also want to give a plug in here, if we had also had a talk at FinOps X in San Diego earlier this year, and in that talk we talked about some of the same things Farhan talked about as far as what the emission types, scope 1, 2, 3, et cetera are, and a different angle to the presentation we have today. So if you want to, the recording is available right at the foundation, so if you want to go and check that recording also out, that'd be good. So just couple talks about what Mastercard is, right? So folks think Mastercard is a bank, right? You can see it's very popular, and every card you'll see that particular logo for Mastercard. So it's not a bank. We are not a bank. We don't like hold accounts. We don't like, what do you call, like have money or all the different things that come with a bank, right? We are basically a technology company. People think it as a financial company, right? But as a core, it's a technology company, basically enabling all different consumers of that technology, right? Payments itself, right? Consumers, retailers, banks, et cetera, right? Managing the transaction payment flow back and forth, right? And you can see from like how much of those transactions we are managing. It's like over 143 billion transactions on a regular basis. Next slide. So this basically also gives you a little bit overview of what the different devices that we connect with, right? It's anything that you can own technology-wise, right? We'll see that the transaction is flowing through it. And we do provide like all the value-add services on top of it, right? Like for make sure the transactions are safe, so fault tolerant is one of the things that we provide services for. And we also want to make sure that it's like easily accessible, right? It's, as you know, it's ubiquitous, and we use that particular, everybody can see that Mastercard. And the biggest thing is that from a brand perspective is people know that we don't say Mastercard inside our logo itself because the brand itself should be sufficient enough for folks to know what Mastercard is. All right.
You want to tell us a little bit about your sustainability goals?
Sure. So at Mastercard, we are pretty much committed to our net zero 2040 goals, right? And as part of the company itself, to meet our goals, what we want to have, we want to do is we want to, in addition to all the on-prem data that we are doing, on-prem carbon footprint that we have, we also make sure that we get the scope 3 emissions, right? So the on-prem pieces like scope 1 and scope 2, but then all the SaaS stuff, all the like CSP stuff, right? So we want to ensure that end-to-end, we can have all sets of emissions reported for our products. Mastercard is a product-based company, right? So our goal here is that we provide that carbon visibility. We're going to be hybrid for a long time, and that carbon visibility is available to us end-to-end for across all the emission types, right? The other one that you also want to make sure is that from our transparency perspective, right, we want to ensure at a product level, product teams or product owners don't care where you're hosted, right? So you have to make sure that you're able to provide that granularity at a product level. And then the other piece is, of course, what are you going to do with the data? The goal here is to make sure that your emissions are reduced, right? So we have to introduce optimization and any efficiencies we can get in our carbon footprint that we have at Mastercard.
The important thing to keep in mind here, too, is that FinOps and sustainability aren't separate functions. They work in concert with each other. So, and you can see this here by the stat that we put up here. More and more of these things are coming together and being the same function. So even though they both have pieces outside, there are FinOps practices that don't intersect with sustainability, and there are things outside of sustainability's areas that are outside of the FinOps scope. But know that these areas come together, so it makes perfect sense for folks like Vik and yourself to have both of these in concert with your practice. Kind of furthermore, as we were talking, sustainability can be in all three phases, right? You can look at it through the iron triangle that JR spoke about this morning, right? You look at that from the lens of carbon, just like you would usage or cost or performance or optimization. Carbon is just another lens that you look at that through. You're going to have that cross-functional partnership that we talked about this morning, which is the core at FinOps from an operate perspective, and having your KPIs and your unit economics around carbon. And then finally, in the inform phase, right, you're able to track and allocate those things. And Vik's going to take us through real-world situations as we get this presentation about how Mastercard is taking and looking across all those three phases. First, we're just going to start with the inform phase, and just kind of, your basic, what are you trying to do in your inform phase? You're trying to just measure, you're trying to understand, you're trying to get that visibility in there. You're just trying to understand what are we counting of phase one, or scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, those types of things. And then, trying to do that show back or charge back from a carbon perspective. So, Vik, I'm going to toss it over to you. I'd love to hear how y'all are going through your inform phase at Mastercard.
Sure. So what we have is from showback perspective, right? Mastercard, to meet the net zero 2040 goals, right? You definitely have the teams that we have set up are from business side of the house, right? We have a chief sustainability officer who was responsible for the whole overarching sustainability practice at Mastercard, but we've got different teams under Mastercard which are responsible for the environmental aspects. Anything that's mentioning with our real estate, with all the other associated carbon efficiencies, and then the thing that we are responsible for primarily is the tech. There's a slide that we talk about how we are aligned, but their responsibility here is that for reporting purposes, one of the things from Inform is that how we are meeting our 2040 goals, right? They talked about ongoing decarbonization effects that we are having. We want to also ensure that we not just look at what we can provide, but also how do we offset, renewable energy as an example. So definitely in our decision making, we look at areas where we can also do some kind of an offsetting with our carbon footprint itself. And then at the same time, whatever we're offsetting with, we want to make sure that's credible, right? So that's the carbon credits. Next slide. All right, so now we come back from all the environmental pieces and all the pieces that are outside of tech that we talked. Now we move into tech, right? Now, one thing that you look at is when you reporting on our goals at Mastercard, right? You can only do so much in that environment, right? You're already at that 90% efficiencies you are gaining currently, but at the same time, Mastercard tech spend is about 60%, right? The overall carbon footprint itself. So it's got a huge opportunity that we need to start focusing into from the tech side of the house, right? That's where we come in. And what we are doing from a reporting perspective for Mastercard is, so for on-prem, we do have all in-house teams which are doing our carbon footprint calculations, emission factors, et cetera, right? But for the cloud, so they came up with a problem statement to us talking about that we are great on on-prem. What do we do about cloud? How do we get visibility into the cloud? So what we started with is, and that's our previous presentation is going to talk about it, that I mentioned earlier, is that, so we started looking at different areas or vendors who we started evaluating. And one thing that we came up pretty quickly is we looked at native providers, we looked at cloud carbon footprint, right? But they all fell short on different areas. And primarily being A, actual reporting itself, B is transparency in the reporting. The third thing is the accuracy of the reporting, and then the last thing is what we're looking for is that how timely the data is. So while doing all the evaluation, we basically then ended up using a third-party provider, a partner, Green Pixie. And what you are seeing right now, the dashboards that are being provided, even though they're provided by them, but then we've got Apptio partner, we're partnering with Apptio. So when we looked at how does that help us from why do we choose Apptio, why do you use Green Pixie, right, as the integration pieces? Mastercard is a huge Apptio shop or IBM shop now, and if you're vested in that particular thing, right, you have to ensure that you have synergies across both on-prem and cloud. We are a hybrid environment, right? So something called TBM, and then you got FinOps on the other side from the cloud perspective, right? So one of the things that we required was synergies between both the tools and how they can operate together to give us not just on-prem, but cloud visibility also. End of the day, our product team, like I mentioned, they don't care where you're hosted, right? You want to see a single pane of glass view across your carbon footprint. So these particular dashboards basically are, from showback perspective, informed perspective, is you can see it gives you like a high level as far as what total carbon footprint is, but then you can break down granularity by, you can go down by region, you can also go by, like we are using tags, like for FinOps tags, right? From tag and governance perspective, you can go down at that level of granularity to get the data. So those are all a part of our POC that we did to be able to get the information, the actionable insights we're looking for with the data itself.
I think you were talking a little bit, you wanted to go into data quality as well too, on how you're being able to how do you decide whether the data quality is good or not?
Correct, right. So what we have here is a rubric that we utilized internally at Mastercard to understand what the data that we are getting, right? So you can see the multiple slides that talk about this. So starting with a few things in here, right? Data accuracy. So again, we are talking about different stages here, right? We talk about inform, you crawl, walk, run, its phases, right? Also, so when you talk about the limited, basic, and proficient, etc., right? They talk about like in a crawl, walk, and run phases of your journey of sustainability in your organizations, if you're looking at that, right? And then within that particular phase itself, for crawl, walk, and run, you can look at all these kind of rubric of what you care about with your data, sustainability data, right? So starting with data accuracy, you want to make sure, right, that the data is accurate. Depending on what region you are, it has to be region accuracy also should be taken into consideration. And then also like what context do you need the data for, right? So that comes into play. The second thing is from the data completeness perspective. From Mastercard perspective, right, our goal was we don't want to wait for like 3 months to enrich our data. So the timeliness was a key for us. And of course, when timeliness, also the data has to be relevant, right? Because it's hard to keep up with the services and the instances, et cetera, the providers are providing us, right? And on top of that, we also want to make sure that the data that we're getting is relevant based on the information that we are going from. Like if you're going from instance A to instance B, right, we'll be able to provide that transparency itself. So continuing that rubric again, right? The other thing that we looked at, the data transparency. If you look at natively at the CSPs, one thing that we ran into the issues were from transparency of the data. You get the data only at certain, like either at a service level data, you're getting the data, again, from an instance level data. So we want to go a little bit deeper, right? Like I said, the granularity was a key for us, but at the same time, that granularity gave us the flexibility that we can go at like a resource level information itself, right? Or we can go at whatever products or application level itself to get the information for us. And I mentioned about relevance already. I think it's the same thing. So it's depending on, again, this is a rubric for how does it fit in your organization. You can pick and choose whatever factors you want to look into or functions you care about from that rubric itself. And there's a couple of slides down, you can take a whole rubric. There's a picture you can take from that too. And then the next thing, so all these things, what I mentioned earlier also is right, is that the key thing here is that you need to have an executive buy-in for this, right? It has to be, it's not just top-down, or not just bottom-up, right? You have to have a top-down buy-in from your executives for this. When we started our journey, right, when we talked about this particular product, we had like everybody involved from our finance partners, we got our executives. It went up to all the way to our CFO, even though it's like they are finance people, but they cared about this particular data, right, to meet our goals. At the same time, all the financial implications behind it, because it's got cost and carbon both, right? So the key thing here is when you look at FinOps, looking at cost, the goal here is with the cost, you provide the carbon visibility also, right? And with the data itself, the last thing I'll mention about is that our stakeholder basically told us, okay, fine, pretty dashboards, great. can I use the data? What can I action with the data itself? So that's one other thing that we also ensured that the data that we are gathering, we're getting from our partners is actionable.
Now we have it all rolled up, right?
All rolled up, correct. Yep. All right.
I'm getting everybody a second to
Sure. Take a picture.
look at your good work there.
Thanks.
Okay, after the inform phase, obviously then we go into optimize, right? And so now we've got all that. We've got the rubric we've set up. We've got the different levels that we're looking at from a crawl, walk, run. Okay, great. We've got some of that set up. How do we use this? I think that was a question that actually got asked in the last session of how much actionability are you doing around that? And so some of the ways that you can do that, just best practices, right? Add carbon to your optimization goals. That's another perspective. It's another lens that you can look at that. Track your right sizing activities there. Where are your wins? Celebrate your incremental wins. Gamification is a way to do that. And Vik's going to take us through some of the ways he does that at Mastercard here.
Sure. So a little bit digging deeper into right sizing. So what we have seen, and that's an actual, what you see on the right side here, it talks about efficiency in carbon and cost. It's like 3x. We have seen that in our environment, right? And starting with with our on-prem stuff, when we started, or when our engineers started using the carbon data next to the cost data, right? You can see one of the things that talked about for FinOps, right? For engineers to take action, right? We can see that growth in that action taking itself by getting the carbon data. Because part of the thing is like their own personal interest or their passion for sustainability, right? That also goes a long way, and we saw that in practice. We were able to see that engineers taking more action, thinking more about not just the cost with the carbon, yes, that we need to go out and action those recommendations that we come up from cost perspective, and one of them is right sizing, right? So we're looking at as far as from right sizing perspective, underutilized instances that we have, right? That's one of the things that we look at right size. And the other thing is turning off resources, especially in our non-production environments, was very easy, the easier wins for getting these particular efficiencies. As you know, everybody, you can do the bigger opportunities, but then it's like right sizing is death by 1,000 cuts, right? So it's a little bit challenging to get people focused on getting that right sizing done, and we use this particular metrics to help us drive that a little bit further.
This kind of goes into that intersection that we were talking about earlier of FinOps and sustainability and being able to use the best of both worlds there on how you're doing that.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So again, what we basically were able to do is what it helps us doing that is we can, of course, cost analysis is a key thing that we are looking into, but also we can able to look at our audit of our carbon footprint itself. We are also looking at we've got clear KPIs that are defined. At Mastercard, our KPIs basically are tied to our bonuses. So we do have that's another incentive that we have for folks to be efficient with our carbon practices, because if it's everybody individual bonus is tied to it, people again are look at it more closely to make sure they're delivering their KPIs. And then of course the last thing is I've already mentioned about the POC that we did, right? It's always good to start short, because then you understand what data you're getting. It's basically using agile practices, and you can quickly pivot if something that, like I said, we did carbon footprint, we did our native CSPs. We started small, looking at different things, and then we pivoted into the vendor the partner that we're trying to work with, Green Pixie, to actually data what we needed. And again, you can see that from savings perspective, right? You got both carbon and cost savings next to it.
And kind of all rolled up again. We'll
Yep.
get another screenshot here for you there with a little bit more detail there about each of those phases that Vik was talking about.
Yep. And this is basically talking about cost and carbon energy decreases, right? The next slides will be interesting when you talk about the opposite way of increases in carbon.
Yeah. And here we go.
Yep. There you go. All right, so this is an interesting one, right? As you can see here, especially on the graph on the right side, not every decision on right sizing reduces your carbon. It might reduce your cost. So that's the challenging thing. That's one of the actions that folks have to think about is that what your priorities are, right? So we're going from instance A to instance B, and you can see the carbon is increasing, right? So you look into as far as what should depending on where you're deployed, right? You can determine whether cost is my priority or carbon my priority. One of the decisions that you make is that if carbon is your priority, what alternative ways do you have to offset that carbon? If you don't have, if you're not using renewable energy in that area you're deployed in, right? There's no other options of reducing that particular, you've got requirements for regulatory, et cetera, whatever that is, right? So you evaluate your options and you put something carbon as a primary driver to either make it efficient, and then you might have to pay more cost because there's no other ways to offset your carbon. So those are the decisions that you have to care about, and without this data, you'll not be able to make the decisions, right? So it's a key, especially when you've got your commitments, you've got regulatory commitments for your organization, right? That you have to be able to get the data to be able to make that decisions.
And one more here with the details there for a photo, but this is where you're talking about from the iron triangle perspective. Are you balancing your efficiency? Are you balancing your cost? Where do you make those decisions? And this is the rubric that you're using to make those decisions.
Correct.
Yep. And finally, we're going to move on to the operate phase. Given one more second here to get a few photos in. And what we're going to talk about here is the core and the allied personas, right? How do you balance this across both your FinOps and the other portions of the business, and where this actually comes together? As we talked about this morning with JR, right, it's the effective partnering and the collaboration piece of FinOps that really comes in here. You have your unit economics, and again, then how do you start to look at how you would automate some of these things too to avoid human error, and have things just be better, faster, stronger, cheaper. So, Vik, you want to tell us a little bit about more how you do operate at Mastercard?
So I mentioned earlier, right? This is how we are structured in Mastercard from the sustainability perspective, right? We do have a chief sustainability officer, right? The team of folks that are primarily responsible for all the public reporting. They're responsible for as far as all the assets that you have outside of our tech, right? Overarching, yes, the full responsibility, but what they work on a regular basis and then we've got our sustainability teams, the tech sustainability team itself, they're responsible for all the data for our physical assets, so all our on-prem stuff. They're also responsible for all the software engineering guild, et cetera. So we do have internal SIG, sustainability SIG at Mastercard, right? So that comprises of that particular team. And then where we sit in is that we are part of technology, strategy, and transformation teams. And we basically bridge the gap between all these different teams, right? So what we are doing is we have combined all this particular data with a single pane of glass for on-prem, for cloud together. And then we are also going to now, going forward, all the environmental stuff also will be in that same single pane of glass view, both for carbon and cost. So that basically, and we are the ones who work with our product teams, our program owners teams, our various stakeholders to provide that data to them to, again, both take actions on both sides of the house, on TBM and FinOps.
Yeah. Speaking of the single pane of glass, I think you're going to go a little bit more detailed on right now about it, right? Yeah.
Correct. There you go. So why is it important to us? And the key from here is that, so outside of the it helps us with governing across all platforms, right? Not just one area, cloud or on-prem. We talked about today in the keynote, right? Going from FinOps to what is +1, right? All different intersecting frameworks. With this particular single pane of glass, it helps us looking at that +1 for all going to private cloud, SaaS, data center, et cetera, right? So that's another piece that we're looking for. You can apply those same principles Natalie talked about, right? How they're looking at going from FinOps, doing that stuff for on-prem also, right? So it's a mindset, it's a culture, right? So our goal here is with the collaboration. When folks talk about, whenever we have discussions with the folks about cloud, right? They always talk about, can we get visibility on the private cloud? Can we get visibility for on-prem? Same visibility, right? So that feedback and those questions that come up basically gave us that what we want to work next, And that's where we are trying to do. Our convergence is a key to us. Our coming straight like top down, like I mentioned, you have to have an executive buy-in. And this helps us, makes us conversations, make it easier, like you don't get a pushback. This, to help that resistance is what's helping us with the single pane of glass to overcome the resistance. And then last thing is, of course, governance. Cost and optimizations, I would say, sustainability talk comes as a side effect, right? That's what it is.
Let's look a little, have some visuals here, right?
Sure.
Showing you what it looks like. Yep.
Sure. So basically, we talked about the from operate phase, right? You care about the KPIs, right? So we have the KPIs listed down here is what we are focusing on right now. Metric ton CO2e, the water itself, right? And then energy. And then the rubric that we talked about earlier, right? We basically have programmed that also in our tools in Apptio, right? So we can see that all different areas. So we're using these, or the whole rubric, we're using those 5 things at this time, or what our goal is aligning to our goals. So you can see on the dashboards is that the governance of or convergence of both on-prem and cloud metrics itself.
Yeah, and you can see even in your single pane of glass here, these are bare metal resources that you're looking at. Whereas in the previous slides, we had AWS instances, I think,
Correct.
right
The
on
FinOps
that.
stuff.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
All right, and now we're going to get to the future. What's next?
Right. So at Mastercard, we have done the on-prem data. We have modeled the data into our Apptio tools or IBM tools now, right? Now next is our cloud data. So we did the MVP and POV stuff earlier. And now what we're doing is we're working with both with Green Pixie, James here, and with Josh and the teams to integrate the data and automate the data. So how it's being done is that Cloudability natively does not have the carbon data, right? We got a cost data at Cloudability. We're taking the existing data from our tools, and we are providing that. Apptio is taking the data and providing it to Green Pixie. So at each line, billing line item, cost and usage report line item, across all the 3 vendors, Green Pixie is taking and enriching the carbon data for us, right? And providing it back to our tools. So how does that help us? With any tool you utilize, right, you have to make sure that you provide access to your users for that tool. If we go and start stacking our tools separately without integration, we'll have to do the same process for all different tools. And then you have to use different dashboards. So one of our things that we focused on is that you already have our billing file, you already have our cost and usage report, right? Why do I need to go back and again go and set up all different master pairs with different tools, right? So they're able to provide the data to us. They can also take the same data and provide it to Green Pixie or whoever partner that you utilize, right? But what we use for ourselves based on the evaluation that we did. And then they're able to enter the data at the cost level. Now, they can do it with us because that's our requirement, Mastercard's requirement, right? You saw Farhan talked about showed you all the different dashboards and QuickSight. Green Pixie can do it on its own itself, right? If people try to use them or try to choose Green Pixie for doing that own dashboarding. But that's not works for us. What works for us is that our single pane of glass. So they agreed, both of them agreed to basically give the data. They already have the data from us, provide it to Green Pixie, and then Green Pixie agreed to basically go ahead and process the data, process the pipeline, and revert the data back to us into our same tools. Well, how does that help us? It reduced our resources like 2x or 3x fold from our perspective, right? We've got no integration from our end. All we focus about now is taking the aggregated data together and make our value decisions with our stakeholders, right? From our perspective, we are not doing any integrations on the back end, how they're going to connect, how you're going to connect our other stakeholders together. This will also enable us from frequency of the data, right? With this automation, we can get, so currently if you look at your on-prem world, you get the data on a monthly basis, right? Requirement for the cloud data is you can get the data more regularly. So if they can get the data regularly, our partners can get the data regularly, why can't they process, enrich, and give the information with the same frequency to us? So if you look at the native providers, if you look at on-prem, it's either a month wait or at least a 3-month wait, especially for sustainability, it's a 3-month wait currently to get the data. But here we're talking about real time, getting data on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. But it's definitely better than 3 months or on a monthly basis. So that also is going to make like our decisions, like faster decisions from our perspective. And the last thing is that we are going to take all this data into our workload planning. So we're talking about shifting left. So currently it's all reactive, right? You're looking at the carbon footprint after the fact that you already implemented, right? Our goal here is, from workload planning perspective, have the data available to us when you are making decisions to going from on-prem to cloud, right? So that's one aspect of it, going from on-prem to cloud. We've got a cost, we've got a carbon. Where are you going to put the workloads in? What providers are you going to put the workload in? Because we are all like 3 providers, like I mentioned. And then the other thing is that, not even that, like even from on-prem perspective, like folks have got regulatory requirements, you have to be on soil, right, et cetera. We will be able to make those decisions on, based with the carbon data, be able to tell how much efficiencies we will get with it, right? Within the region itself, like, yes, I understand there's some regulatory requirements, but we can tell, okay, you're going from on-prem to cloud, you have to be in this particular region, your data has to reside here. You might be efficient, you might not be efficient, but at least you can see what your carbon footprint is. So that's shifting left, making that data available to us right from start, even before deploying our workloads, on the actionable things that we can do with the data.
I don't think we'd have any complete conversation if we didn't talk about AI. Right?
Sure.
So
yes.
How about we talk about some AI?
Right. So Mastercard is pretty big on the AI perspective. You can see some like public information out there if you Google it up, and then you talk about as well how you're using AI practices, especially in the fault tolerance itself. But as you know, it comes with its own challenges with sustainability itself. So what we are looking at focusing on now is how do we ensure that we can be efficient with the use, like the 3 things we mentioned here is power consumption is one thing, right? Make sure that we are fine-tuning our LLMs. We also making sure that our training is efficient. So that's things that we are focusing on. But these decisions are now being done sooner than later, right? While we are deploying the workloads, we are ensuring that people think about sustainability with that mindset, that how will it make sure it's not just like cost efficient, but also it's energy efficient, carbon efficient also. The next thing from an environmental perspective, again, I mentioned about like workload placement, right? So with AIs, again, from trainings, we also doing on-prem GPUs with NVIDIA. So again, so those factors are coming into play both for on-prem and cloud. And sure, and then the last thing is from the talent perspective, right? So this information has now also been provided to the software engineers. So when they're doing their training for their AI models, et cetera, they ensure that we have got efficient practices for sustainability.
Excellent.
Yep.
Vik, thank you very much for sharing all that. I've learned a whole bunch here. I hope everybody else did too. Thanks, Vik.
Let's give them a warm round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much, Vik and Josh. That was fantastic.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy sharing all of these amazing FinOps stories, best practices, and expertise. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for our speakers. Check out more FinOps X content on our YouTube channel. We appreciate the support.